Hello, I'm Mara Trumbull from Art Expression Studio in Ellington, Florida, and I would like to thank the Acrylic Painting Club for choosing me once again to be a member of the team for the online painting magazine. My new creation is called Cascades. It's a fantasy painting of a garden far, far away in my imagination that I'd like to share with you today. This project will be painted with my preferred colors, DecoArt, who make traditions rich in pigment, and Dynasty black silver brushes that help me convey my message. Today we'll start with the sky, and the sky colors are cerulean blue and warm white. Using a crisscross stroke, which I always advocate, we are painting the canvas not only in the front but also the sides and the back, so that being gallery wrap, if you wish to hang it up without framing, it looks very nice all the way around, continuing your design on the sides, the top and the back of the canvas. The stroke on crisscross is to ensure that every thread on your cotton canvas is covered, whereas if you only paint horizontal or vertical, you may miss some of the threads going through. We're putting the dark blue on both corners, and without cleaning the brush, adding some warm white, and again crisscrossing it towards the center of the canvas. Don't make this into a hard line. Make sure that it's soft and blended in between the blue and the white, becoming a very light celestial blue. And this helps with the atmosphere, creating that trick of the eye, as it were, of the great infinity of the sky, being deeper at the sides and lighter in the top. Also, as you gradually come down towards the horizon, your colors will be getting lighter. So there'll be less blue put on your brush and more white. On a second version, when I've taught this same project several times, I have also used a little bit of lilac at the bottom and sometimes even a little bit of yellow, but it's entirely up to you. This example has only got the blue and the white, but I will show you a photograph of what it'll look like with a lilac at the bottom as well. It's actually done with a light violet color, blended in again with the blue and the white. When painting the sky this way, just with the brush, and not mixing the color on the palette but on the actual brush itself, you get a lot of variations and hues of the two colors. Here I'm just softly blending across, and if you're wanting some softer clouds on top, put some warm white on the corner of your flat brush and just twirl it around to give you the soft formations of the clouds. The higher sky seems to have more of the more rounded clouds, whereas the lower sky has wispy, more diagonal formations. And if you make them diagonal rather than horizontal, the eye of the person that's viewing your painting will automatically bring everything to the center, so you'll get more attention this way than if you were just doing them flat, horizontal. When you get to the bottom, just finish it right up to the drawing of the rocks, and then stand back and see. I've noticed a little bit of discrepancy here. There's too much blue on the two corners and not enough in between, so I need to bring some back gradually. So I'm just loading my brush with a little bit more blue and inserting it diagonally in between some of the white strokes. And it's only ever so gentle, so it's not as strong as the one that you have on the top two corners, but it's really just to gradually change between the blue and the white. Also, if the cloud in the middle is a little bit too strong, you put a little bit of blue in there as well. Time to check that both the sides and the top of your canvas match the color of your sky before we move on to start painting the canvas black. This is the photograph I was mentioning to you with a little violet at the horizon. So please personalize your canvas with your colors. Now we're going to start using the Black Magic formula of Brenda Harris, the teacher that taught me this technique and to whom I'm forever grateful. We're painting it with DecoArt Traditions Carbon Black, and this part is going to be pretty boring, so I'm going to speed up the film for you. So if you've never painted a black canvas background and you're wondering why, the necessity of it is because black is very dramatic color, as you know, and when you put other colors against it, it really makes them pop. I use this background quite often in both acrylic and oil painting, and I find that most of the old masters use this technique as well. And nowadays, if you often follow my other teachers, Kathy Jenkins on the florals and Bob Ross on the landscapes, you'll see this has been used as a lot, either with black gesso, or I just go straight on to paint, because most canvases have already got a layer of gesso underneath. They've all been primed, so there's no need to gesso them again. And traditions have got a very thick pigment. One coat does it all. You don't need to go over it 2 or 3 times. Okay, as soon as your black is dry, it's time to start tracing your pattern, and we'll be using white graphite on the black canvas. And this is your pattern. It's mainly the rocks and the waterfalls tracing, and they don't go all the way back to the sides because I want the vegetation to actually be painted against the black. Here I'm using a tiny little trowel palette knife, and I'm starting with the colors light, closer to where the rocks are facing the sun, and I will gradually go darker as I go inwards. Now when you get to use this knife, because it's very tiny, very small, and I prefer them this way rather than the big palette knives, you can get into all the little corners. And I'll show you a couple of methods of doing this painting as well. You could, if you want, to use a brush, nothing's stopping you. But what I like about the palette knife is the texture that it creates. In fact, if you so wish, you could even add texture medium to your paint colors, or paint it first with texture medium and then go on top of it with your acrylic paints. DecoArt makes a beautiful texture paste as well. So the golden color goes, as I said, at the beginning of your rock formation. We then start introducing beige and also a burnt sienna and burnt umber as we get closer to the dark portions of the rocks. Now where the paint breaks, and here what I mean by breaks, you've seen Bob Ross on documentaries paint snow on the mountains, okay? And when you go across it, oh, here by the way, with a clean wet brush, I'm cleaning a little smudge. I came over the rocks, over the waterfall, so I'm just removing it with a wet brush. And you can do that with a sponge or a towel as well, or a baby wipe. So getting back to the breaking of the snow, you've seen when you hold a palette knife very gently and you skim down the mountainside, not all the surface catches the paint. There are some breaks in between where the black or the darker base color shows through. And I want you to leave this in there, because in rock formations you have holes, you have fissures, cracks, grasses growing in there, so all sorts of things. So you do want these colors not to be blending into one another flat. Also hold your palette knife sometimes straight, sometimes diagonal, sometimes sideways, upside down, back to front, which I often have to do when I'm in front of the camera and I don't want to get my arm in your way. So rather than switch hands, because I'm not really ambidextrous, I've tried it a couple of times, I paint upside down as well. So you're probably wondering why I'm not going all the way back, and that again is because once I start painting the ferns and the palm trees and things, they look better if they're painted against black than the rock. It would be a waste of paint and time putting rock all the way back when the effect is so much nicer without. So here's the first rock formation. Now here's the other technique that I use. It's a cut up. Used to be credit card. My husband said no more do I use credit cards, because your identity can still be stolen from a card that's been thrown away with your old details on it. So if you've got an expired gift card, or sometimes hotel door cards, anything that's hard, cut it on the diagonal and you hold it on the thick side, and on the thin side you put the paint on. And this is just like the broad palette knife, but it's easier to manipulate and much cheaper too if you lose them or break them as often as I do. Sometimes I open cans of paint with mine and snap them, which is a no-no. I've learned since then to carry a screwdriver. So here again we put the lighter colors on the top where the sun is touching the rocks, and as we come down we gradually change colors. So again there's a mixture of yellow gold in there, beige, burnt sienna, burnt umber, and I think I've also squeezed in there some madder brown. But practice making these rocks on paper first, and use the colors of your preference. You may prefer like granite rocks going more onto the grays and the blacks rather than the golden colors. It's entirely up to you. Now as the rock turns towards the viewer, it gets darker because it's away from the sun, so I'm adding umber there but pulling some of the light colors down a little bit, so it's not a total change from light to dark. And that is what we call the plane of a rock, where the rock is flat. It's like a table there. You could actually have a picnic on that ledge. And this is your first rock layer. Now you've got to really dry it well. So if you haven't got the time or the patience to wait until it's dry before you start painting your waterfall, do run along to the bathroom, grab your hairdryer and come out and dry it. Make sure you hold the hairdryer 6 to 8 inches away. You don't want to cook your paint, okay? So here come the Cascades now. Get your plate ready with Prussian blue, cerulean blue and titanium white. Don't pour out too much paint at once because, as you know, it gets dry pretty quickly and you always want to have a supply of fresh paint. So looking at the design, we will start with the top waterfall. And first we will put down the Prussian blue as a base coat. So I'm going to paint it across and then down, and you can hardly see the Prussian blue is a very, very strong blue. You hardly see it against the black, but you will see it once you put in white. And on the pond we're going to put in some cerulean blue reflecting the sky color as well. So that is done with a flat brush. Now I'm holding the rake or comb brush, and with diluted white, a little bit of water so it's not too thick, you're going to start forming the waterfall, and that's done like a number 7. You slide across and then come down and slide across and come down and reverse the stroke from the other side. You come over a little bit. Whoops, well that wasn't meant to be there, but since there's an oops there, I'll show you how to correct them. Okay, so here it comes again, coming down on the waterfall. Now sometimes if you use too much white, you can go back and put a little bit of blue again on there, so it's no problem. If you make boo-boos, they're all adjustable. Here I've got the Prussian blue again on the flat brush, and I'm leveling the water at the bottom and starting to create the pond. Now what I have missed above it is a little bit of the riverbed that I wanted to show, so I will be going back there to correct it in a little while. So you just zigzag on top of the dark blue, and again leave some of the dark bits open. Don't cover everything into a flat blue. Zigzag and load your brush always with 2 colors. Like here I've got cerulean and white, so that it's not all one flat shade. I've got a little bit that missed behind that rock, so I'm going to touch it up. And sometimes you can go upwards instead of downwards. Now we're going to put some of the spray, and I'm using a little deer foot brush here. If you don't have a deer foot, see if you can find a scruffy or a tiny little mop brush. They'll both do the job. And then I'm back to getting some white on the comb or rake brush, and I use this rather than the flat because it's it gives thin little wispy lines, and I'm just zigzagging a nervous little stroke here to show the turbulent waters below the waterfall before we get to do the next cascade. Okay, so, and before that next waterfall, we're going to do another little rock formation here, and I'm going to speed this twice the speed. Excuse the camera going a little out of focus, but I'm repeating much of what I did above, starting with the light color and slowly adding the middle and the darker colors. And on the next one, I'm definitely going to give it a try with some texture medium in it. I'm having so much fun doing these rocks. Here's another little flatty. Now please feel free to change my pattern so that it's not exactly like my painting. I always encourage my students to use their own imagination, and if there's any room for improvement, don't feel I'd be offended. I'm actually pleased when students come out with something different, using the original technique that I was taught and I've passed on from Brenda Harris, but changing as you go along with different waterfall formations, different rock formations. You may like them more round like boulders. You may like the waters to be deeper, coming up from higher level. And but once you've learned this technique, it's fun to do. You can alternate your cascades instead of having lots of little ones to just having one major waterfall. So here we are, last little rock in this section. And I'm sure I've actually changed some of the designs too as I went along, because I was in a hurry to do some corrections and things. So you'll probably even find there is a difference between my finished product here once you see it and the pattern that I've drawn for you. But that's me. Never twice the same thing. Move across to the other side now and back to using the plastic card. I'm going to try and make an entire painting out of these cards. It'll be fun, just to challenge myself. I've seen some of those palette paintings done by artists where they've got the finer little details done with a metal or a plastic tool, and it's unbelievable. It does take a lot of patience. You know, rocks doesn't matter what you do, because this will look like rocks at the end when you finish messing around with them. But I have seen actual portraits done with palette knives, and I thought, never ever is he going to get those eyes and the look of the face and those beautiful lips, but they've done them. It's just a matter of a lot of practice. Now here, the little rocks, I could have done those with a brush because the tiny little boulders at the bottom there. So if you feel easier doing them with a brush, please, there's no right and there's no wrong, as I say, when it gets to painting, so use your own discretion. Sorry, it's slightly out of the camera range here, but you know what's happening behind there. I'm just adding some of the darks at the bottom of the rocks. So remember, I told you I'd forgotten to put the river on top of the first waterfall. I've put one in now on the top there, and I'm just adjusting the spray at the bottom again. And then I'm going to pick up some more foam at the bottom. Just twirl your brush around and soften it. And looking at it close up, I will pick up a little liner brush and do some tiny little S strokes, showing the water rushing down to throw itself off the cliff. And here and there where it's dark, I'm just going to put a few little more white streaks, and you can straighten it up. My waterfall was actually slightly to the side because of the angle I was painting to keep out of the camera's way. So while I was at it, I'm going to straighten that as well. But you'll be painting from the front. So time to move on now. We've done the 2 layers of rocks either side of the second pool. We've got to make little distant trees on top. And because of the distance of the atmosphere, your color trees, no matter how green they are, will be seen a bluish purplish hue. Forgive please the angle of the camera here, it's slightly to the side, so everything looks distorted. I wish I could turn it around. I'm cleaning up here. Wherever I smudge it, I've got a wet brush on standby that erases my mistakes out. So that's more lilac at the bottom and slightly bluish white on the top. Taking off all the boo-boos here. And let's do a little bit on the other side as well. This is done on a fan brush with the 3 colors loaded up, which is dioxazine, blue and white. And here again, I've smudged over the rock, so I'm just going to give that rock a clean out with the wet brush and my tissue. Bring down some tree trunks there, and voila, that's also done. Now comes the fun part, the painting with the sponges. Make sure they are natural sea sponges and not synthetic, in order to obtain this lovely lacy effect in the cherry blossom. Squeeze your sponge out of the water, make sure it's damp but not dripping wet, and pounce it on the dioxazine purple, the light violet and the white, and then slowly dab 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 across to form the cherry tree. Now if you feel it's too light, you press against the bottom, which will give you the darker purple coming out, and if there's too much purple there, you press against the tip, which has got more white. So we'll do the first foundation and then we'll look at it and go over it again. And yes, it does need a little bit more white on the tip, so load up the tip of the sponge again, and there where I made a boo-boo, I washed it out with another clean sponge that I have there. So the sky is absolutely dry at the back, so there's no damage to that. So if anything catches your eye that shouldn't be there, remove it immediately and you'll have no problem with a wet tissue or a wet sponge or a wet brush. So now getting back to the sponging, we're putting a little bit more white at the end of the branches. And that's it. Now we'll get on to putting on the trunk and the branches of the cherry tree. And I'm using burnt umber for this. And I'm also using a round brush, which is fully loaded. And I press it at the beginning to give me the thickness of the trunk. And I lift my hand and the pressure on the brush to obtain the small little dainty edges of the brushes at the end. Now normally I would suggest you start from the beginning of the branch to the end to obtain that fine lifting off effect. But once you've learned and you've practiced enough, you can actually start from the outside in instead of the inside out. You just have to be very careful that your brush is not overloaded and it makes a big blob there. And if it does, again, you can remove it with a sponge. If it's easier for you, please pick up your liner brush at this stage and do the smaller branches with the liner brush. And as you can see, I have watered down the paint considerably, so it's much lighter in color too. Now we're going to go across and do the apple tree, which is exactly the same manner. I have pre-done the skeleton of the tree in this instance, which is in the same technique as I've done the brown one, so I won't bore you with doing it again. The difference here is I've double loaded the brush with black and white, so that I've got the white facing the sunny side in the middle of the painting. So the colors on this are pine green and light Irish green with warm white at the end. But you can use any green that's in your paint box. I just like experimenting and switching over my colors and painting. Now for the bushes, the flowers and the ferns. This is again sponge painting again here, done with green, blue and white, with burnt sienna, orange and yellow, with a little bit of white on the ends. And again, you can alternate the colors as you feel like it. And this is a palm tree done with the comb or rake brush, and exactly the same way as we've done the waterfall. You have little C strokes. You can make ferns, you can make palm trees, you can make palm fronds. This is one brush does it all. And if you water down the paint very, very gently, now here I was trying to lighten a little bit, and I put a bit too much white, and so the side facing the waterfall again is where the sun is. It's a little bit lighter. So I'm going to lighten some of those ferns again there with a bit of the white mixed in with the green, and less so on the other side, which is in shadow. Now you see the effect it has on top of the black. This is actually a darker version of the green, but because it's against the black, it's looking very, very light as well. I love this little brush. I think it's become one of my favorite. A little bit darker on the left side. So there's your palm tree, and there's nothing to it. This is slightly off camera again. What it is, it's a vertical brush, triple loaded, excuse me, with green, blue and white, and I'm holding it vertical and now slightly diagonal to make a little rockery flower that's just hanging onto that edge there and cascading down as well. Back to our friendly sponge, and this has got now green, yellow and white on the edge, and I'm going to use it on the other side as well, and just by adding a little bit of cerulean blue to it, it'll make a difference so that they're not identical on both sides. So we're going to have a real flame bush over here, and this again is with the reds, the oranges and the yellows. And once again, if you feel this color is too strong for you, please subdue it a little bit with by adding more white or more beige to it, or changing it all together. If you prefer pinks, go ahead and add some pinks in here. I've just added a little bit of green at the bottom of that bush just for it to look more natural with some greeny leaves. And this is the sponge I just used on the other side with the yellows, except I've added some cerulean blue to it, and it's just giving it a different color. But look how beautiful it looks against that black. Now just the very bottom of it where the green is, I'm going to go along that ledge of that rock just to make some growth on there. Just very, very light and lacy. Then here I've added a bit of orange quickly on it, and it changed the color entirely. The other sponge that had the blue on it, I'm trying to make some vertical little bluebells. It's not working so well with the sponge, so I'm going to go for the brush here. And again, I've put a few colors on there, some of the purples, some of the blues, some of the white, and just by touching it slightly, going up and down, these could be lavender or it could be bluebells, could be anything your imagination says it is. I love these fantasy paintings. It's one of my favorites, and I've sold quite a few to a company that makes calendars and greeting cards and puzzles. Here's a fern that looks very much like the farm fronds on the other side, and I've added a little bit of purple here with the green so that it wouldn't be the same vibrant green as the other side. And now we're getting ready to do the final stages of our cascades. So rocks first, water later. And again, this has been speeded up for your convenience. And also so you wouldn't get too bored. As we come down, I'm going to try and use some darker colors. I've actually also added onto the bigger rocks some blue and some purple at the end. Now here there's a funny story to these 3 little rocks I have put in the middle of the final cascades. They're on your drawing, and you'll probably wonder what has happened to them when you get to see the end of my result. And this particular one, the middle one, is in the middle. It's higher than the water level, so it's going to survive the flood. When it gets to the other 2, it's a different story. And that's what makes my painting unique. They're never meant to be identical, no matter how many times I paint them. Here's a little one there. And then, oh, I've got to put some dark at the bottom of this one. Now let's not go too dark. We'll blend it in a little bit. And the very bottom ones are more in the shade because they got all that vegetation growing behind them, casting the shadows down on them. So only the tips are going to be golden, and the rest is going to be pretty dark. Well, they will eventually. Sometimes when I paint, even if I'm doing instructional videos, I'm having such a good time. I'm going slow and I'm going over things again 2 or 3 times, and then I remember, whoops, I think they want me to finish this pretty quick. So this has got a little bit of the blue and purple I've just added on the big rock, and I'm going to put some at the bottom here too. There is another little rock. There it comes, yes. 3 little rocks there, okay. And the idea is to have some of the water coming over them, but so that you should still see them in transparency. And here I'm adding some purple and some blue onto the rocks there. Okay, now we'll wait for those rocks to dry, of course, and then we'll start painting the rest of the waterfalls. So the one above, sorry, again, it's a little bit out of camera range, but you'll see the main effect. And again, it comes over and falls down into the pool. And then the spray there. And at the bottom you want to flatten it, water level. And you can enhance some of the spray in the back one as well. Paint tends to sink into the canvas, as you've often seen. So what looks very bright when you first paint it, after a while you look back and say, it could do with a little refresher. So put a little extra layer of paint on top if you have to, on the spray and the foam of the waterfalls. Now here I'm base coating this cascade with the Prussian blue again. And while this is wet, I'm getting my other brush ready, the comb or rake brush with the diluted white, and down we come. Now don't forget, I'm painting from the side, so it's looking crooked. Yours should look like a number 7 coming across and down. Then later on I will check the level of my water, and wherever it's crooked it'll get fixed. Again with the deerfoot brush I'm making the foam at the bottom of the cascade. Prussian blue again goes underneath it to form its shadow flat and to form the water in the pool here. to the rake brush and the white, and we'll start doing the lines to make the current of the water come across. Around the rocks. As long as you hold your brush horizontal, you'll be fine. Softly, softly on top to just blend some of that white into the blue, but don't make it all one color. Remember, you want to see the variations and you want to see the turbulence of that water. And we're going to touch up the spray several times actually before we finish. So I'm holding all three brushes in my hand. Prussian blue on the flat brush. And then warm white. No, actually here it's no longer warm white. Excuse me, the warm white was used in the sky. This is titanium white. Okay, there goes that little stone there. Yes, no, don't overdo it, don't overdo it. Didn't I just tell you not to overdo it? Okay, now this is where also you have to decide, because I was painting at the side, I was really off on the height of my waterfalls. So I took a ruler and I measured it and fixed the level there. So now I'm going to redo those waterfalls coming down. This was meant to be a soft little stroke, so that that rock could still be seen through. If I stopped there, that would have been good. And then coming over again to strengthen that side. Now it's level. And I wish I hadn't done this, because I have now covered up the cute little rock. Now, since the rock was dry, I could have taken a sponge and wiped it off and still show the rock through. But no, I decided to show you, if you have too much white, how you can fix it by putting blue on top again and then bringing some white on, so the rock is totally gone. So once upon a time there was a rock there, which is no more, but the waterfall still looks cute, so I'm not going to mess with it. Just remember, sometimes less is more in your pictures. So now we'll have to base coat again the bottom, which is either a pool, and there's a little pool in there still that needs fixing. Okay, and zigzag some of the water there. There we are. If the white is a little bit strong, dilute it a little bit, walk it off, that's it. It's good. Now some of the foam. Now you could wait until the next step and put the foam in now, but I like to do it in stages, so I'll put some of the foam in there with the deer foot, or your scruffy, or your mop. And then of course under the rock you don't get as much, you just get some of the current carrying some of the foam across, but it's not as fluffy as where the water actually falls. Now we're putting the blue across it again, the Prussian blue, and this is either a pond, a pool, a river, whatever you like it to be. And if you move your pattern up, it can be a little bit bigger too. So decide how much you want at the bottom before you start tracing your pattern on there. So finally, with the rake brush and a little bit of diluted white, we start making zigzag patterns along the pond. This is the water that will be flowing here and also at the bottom of your pond, lake or river. Now don't forget you're hitting the edge of your painting, so if you lift up your canvas you want this painting to continue underneath. So base coat with the dark blue, the Prussian blue, and then with some white, just zigzag across, make some lines that basically upside down C's and U's and just Z's, and just to make it look like water current to match the top section of it, and also slightly at the side as well. So here we are, we're at the end of our painting. All that remains for us to do is sign your name, and do that with pride, because I'm sure your painting is just as beautiful, might even be better than mine. So remember, you don't have to frame this painting, but if you do, it'll be a gallery piece, I promise. Thank you for being with me today. Thank you for completing Cascades with me, and I look forward to the next adventure through the Acrylic Painting Club and the online magazine. And I'd like to thank very much Brenda Harris for teaching me this technique, and Nilda for inviting me to be an online painting member, DecoArt for supplying the paints, and Dynasty Black Silver brushes for the complimentary set. I really look forward to meeting you next time, Sue, so please stay in touch. Goodbye for now. Love you.